Okay, the purpose of this video is to go through these 14 statements of what is the 12 Angry Men Anticipation Guide. The idea here is I just want to get you thinking about justice, and so I'm asking you to make some judgments about how you feel about some things and be able to explain the reasoning behind that. Okay, so you should have this white paper in front of you, title with just your name at the top, and then asking you to agree or disagree with the following statements. Okay, for each of these, we're going to start by going through them and explaining them. And as I go through them, if you could just write whether you agree or disagree on each of the statements as I explain what they mean. Some of them require more of an explanation than others. Then afterwards, I'm going to have you go back and pick any 5 of them and tell me why. Okay, so you don't necessarily need to explain why on every single one, but you'll just pick any 5 that you feel strongly about and go and say why you agree with that or why you disagree with that particular statement. Okay, so here we go. We're going to just go through the 14 statements and talk about them and explain what they mean. Number 1, it is easy to hold an opinion that is not the majority. So this is saying, is it pretty easy for you to have your own opinion even if it's not really shared by other people around you? If you agree with that statement, then you'd say, if you feel like that's true, then you'd say agree. If however, it's kind of difficult to maintain your own perspective when you're surrounded by people that disagree with you, then maybe you would say disagree here, and that's fine. Okay. Number 2, if someone is found guilty of a crime by court of law, then that person is guilty of that crime. What I meant by that statement is just simply saying, if someone is found guilty, do you believe that they actually committed it? It's a question about the trust you have in the legal system, as opposed to saying, yes, they were found guilty, but I don't really think they were. In general, do you feel like if someone was found guilty, do you tend to think that they committed the crime or not? Okay. So if you agree with that statement, just write agree. If not, of course, disagree. Number 3, if I found myself in a courtroom, I would want a jury of my peers to decide my fate. If you were being charged, would you want a jury of your peers to decide it, or would you want someone who, was very different from you? And the idea of jury of your peers, by the way, is not saying necessarily that they're your friends or they're the exact same age as you, but just it's people that are from your area, from your community, as opposed to saying, oh, you're on trial, so one judge will do it, or will decide whether you're guilty or innocent, or saying, yes, we're going to have a jury, but that jury is going to be selected from, Colorado to come in and decide your fate, or somewhere else, as opposed to saying, no, people from my community. Okay, which would you prefer? So if you feel comfortable with that, if you would prefer the jury of your peers, you'd say agree. Okay. Number 4, certain people are more likely to commit a crime than others. This is a controversial statement. Do you feel like there are certain people that are predisposed, or in other words, they have a higher tendency to commit crime? And that may be because of personality. Like there are some people maybe that you feel like their personality just lends itself more to rebelling and committing crime, or do you feel like there are other factors in play that lead people to commit crime or not commit crime? Anyways, just tell me, do you feel like there are certain people that are more likely overall to commit crimes than other people? Okay. Number 5, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. That's a motto for the justice system, saying no one should be considered guilty until they have been proven that way. I think of it as the starting point. Do you start by suspecting someone as guilty, or do you start by suspecting them as being innocent? This statement is saying you have to start by suspecting them to be innocent, and only when they're proven guilty can you change your mind about that. Okay, so that's the motto, by the way, of the justice system, and that comes up quite a bit in the play that we'll be reading. Number 6, the judicial system is always fair and impartial. Do you, and probably the key here is always. Do you feel like it's always fair and impartial? If so, then you'd write agree. If not, then disagree. Number 7, a jury should be required to reach a majority vote, not a unanimous decision. Okay, this one requires some explanation. A majority vote would just be like saying, what's the popular opinion? Say you have 12 people and everyone votes whether innocent or guilty, and if 7 people vote guilty, then that's a majority, and so we should be able to consider him guilty. However, currently it's based on unanimous decision, meaning every person in the jury has to agree. If, say, again, you have 7 people who say innocent, or 7 people that say guilty, and 5 people that innocent, then the judge would say, keep talking about it until you all are in agreement. All 12 of you, or however many jurors there are, would need to agree on either guilt or innocence in order for it to work. Anything else they would say is a hung jury, and say either keep deliberating or we'll start over with a new jury. So that's the difference here. So again, the question here is, do you agree that we should switch to a majority vote option versus the way it is now with unanimous? So agree here says you prefer majority vote. Disagree here says you agree with the unanimous decision method that's currently in place. Okay. All right, number 8, victims and victims' families should have a say in the defendant's punishment. Do you agree with that idea? Currently, that's not the case, at least not directly. Most of the time, victims' families or the victims themselves may be able to speak to the judge to say, here's how I feel about this issue. Sometimes the judge will allow that. But that's only indirectly impacting the punishment, only if the judge chooses to listen to that individual or those individuals would that be the case. Most of the time, victims and victims' families have no say in what actually happens to the defendant. So, but I'm asking here, should they? So maybe you disagree with that. Maybe you feel like the victims and the victims' family should have some say in the punishment. Okay, or of course disagreeing would be more in line with the way things are now. All right, number 9. This is the big question, right? The death penalty as a whole, is it appropriate to utilize the death penalty? Now, realize the death penalty is used for capital crimes, meaning these are crimes not like shoplifting, right? That would never warrant the death penalty in the United States. The death penalty would only come into place if for like serial murders, serial rapists, someone who had committed a cold-blooded murder in a really gruesome manner. Those would be the only situations would come up for death penalty, especially here in Utah. There are some states that don't have the death penalty at all, and some states that use the death penalty quite regularly. And so there's a wide variety, but I'm asking overall, do you feel like the death penalty is appropriate? If you agree with that, then you're saying yes for the death penalty. If you're disagreeing, you're saying the death penalty is not an appropriate penalty for certain crimes, for any crimes, and so that would be, or maybe you'd say the death penalty is appropriate only in these crimes, when these crimes have been committed, and not when these ones. Okay. All right, number 10. Everyone has biases towards certain races, ethnicities, genders, etc. So, do you believe overall that everyone has a bias against certain groups of people, or do you feel like biases are learned and it's possible to make it through life without having a bias? Okay, that's number 10. Number 11, when someone is on trial, in order for a jury to believe the person on trial is guilty, they need to believe beyond a reasonable doubt that the person is guilty. This, by the way, this first part is just an explanation. It's not a statement, a judgment statement at all. This means that you have to be convinced the person committed the crime instead of just being pretty sure. Now, here's the judgment part I'm asking you to come into. Do you feel like that rule is too strict? Let me explain the rule one more time and walk through that, and then I'll ask you to make a judgment on that. So currently, the phrase beyond a reasonable doubt, so you're innocent until proven guilty, and you have to be proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So these two phrases work in conjunction with each other. If there's any way, myself as a jury, if there's any way that I can doubt, saying, well, maybe he didn't really do this, they haven't really proven this aspect of it. If I have any doubt, then really I need to vote innocent or not guilty. Okay, and the only way I can vote guilty is if they have proven it beyond a reasonable doubt. There's no way that I can reasonably doubt his innocence. That and then that would be the only situation. And so, the question here is: do you feel like that rule is too strict? Should we allow some doubt? So, is there because honestly, it's possible if someone committed a crime and they did it in a way that could not be proven, but there's a lot of evidence showing that they most likely committed it, but nothing hard showing it, they could get away with it. They could be convicted or proven innocent simply because people couldn't prove that they had done the crime. So do you feel like maybe that's too much? Maybe you would say we should scale that back a little bit and say some doubt is reasonable, some doubt is okay, and still convict the person of guilt. Okay, and then of course disagreeing with that statement would be keeping it the way it is and saying no, you need to have reasonable doubt. You need to go beyond reasonable doubt to prove guilt. Okay. And number 12, it is important for all jurors to be unbiased, as unbiased as possible when deciding the fate of a person on trial. Do you feel like unbiased is important, or do you feel like sometimes the biases that people bring with them can help them in a trial? Okay. Number 13, if you were convicted murder, would number 11 and 12, would you want those two rules to apply to your trial? Okay, so now you're on trial. Would you want the reasonable doubt clause? Would you want people to come in with a lack of bias when deciding your fate? Okay, so 13 is looking at those two questions as if you were the person on trial. 14 is switching the roles. Now say it's someone who you're close to was murdered, and you're watching the trial of that person. Would you want these two rules, again 11 and 12, to apply to the person who is convicted of, who is being tried for the murder of someone close to you? Okay, so it's just reversing those roles. Okay, so now that you've hopefully gone through and said agree or disagree on each of those 14, now again pick 5 of those statements and go through and just tell me which ones or why you agree with that or why you disagree with that particular statement, and just again pick 5 that you feel strongly about one way or the other. Thank you.